Native Americans in entertainment. Um, so recently, what's his name? Chadwick Boseman passed away. I had, I don't know, I had like a really rough time with that. It was strange because I didn't know him personally, and I doubt you knew him personally, but I think for myself and a lot of people that I'm friends with, there it felt personal because of what he helped bring to the big screen. You know, with Black Panther, and then just that feeling that you know, hey, big box office movie with just Black people can actually work. And you know, there was that regal, you know, sense to the character he portrayed, and so you know, I love that about his performance and all that, and because of that, it was a big shock when he passed away. That is a big prelude to my question about, um, you know, representation in media. I think it was great to have that, you know, Black representation in media, and then you know, in preparation for this interview, I was thinking of like Native American representation in media, like it's like where is it, what are the big you know figures that you know a Native American could look to and say you know that's my dude and all that stuff. So my question to you is, do you think that those figures do exist? Why not expand?
Maybe not enough of them. Graham Greene was an OG though. He was the best. You can see him in Dances with Wolves and other things like Twilight, but just side things. And getting back to Chadwick, that hit like a ton of bricks because of just what what was going on at the time in 2020, what is going on at the time in 2020. Some strange things that I looked up and fact checked, and it was the anniversary of Jackie Robinson, where he played Jackie Robinson in a movie the day he died. And it was also the birthday of the person who wrote um, or directed Black Panther. So it was very strange. I felt like, I don't know if you believe in quantum physics, that we might have turned right there that day when we were supposed to turn left. It just seemed, it's like you said, it, it was just strange all around, actually. It just seemed very deflating when that happened. As far as representation of natives, well, you're just happy at times, I think, in Hollywood when people who are supposed to represent a certain ethnicity are actually played by people who are of that ethnicity. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's I'm pretty sure that's the standard that Hollywood's been talking about the past couple of years, longer than that, you know. And there's plenty who speak up about that. As far as uh, there might be a few, but not anyone mainstream who I look up to. Just examples of movies where, again, the standard was met that the characters who were supposed to be native actually were indigenous. So that's no, I'd say the biggest figure in my time was Graham Greene. I always enjoyed the characters that he played.
Is it Graham Greene? That's his name?
Yep, Graham Greene with a E at the end. And Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner. It's probably a big one. He was fantastic in that, actually. You should check that out if you haven't seen it. Um, Besides that, no, there's pretty little representation. I think there was a movie one time with about World War or the World War II with the Pacific Ocean, and they had I forget what tribe actually now, possibly Apache or Comanche, and they had their code used so the Japanese couldn't break it, because how are you gonna know a Native American, you know, tribe's language? I don't even know my own currently. Um, and I do believe the main actor in that, well, I guess I don't even know if I could consider him the main actor actually, but he was Yeah, yeah. No, that I just answered your question there. I can't really think of someone who plays a main actor, you know, but certainly Hollywood could address that issue easily. There's plenty of actors all over the place, and you have that argument with when you talk about ableist language for people in wheelchairs and things like that who actually are versus someone possibly more famous who they just want to sit down. So there's a wide array to talk about that too, I guess.
people people in wheelchairs versus actors who just sit down. Okay. Veering away from the entertainment section for a second. Uh, I wanted to get into a lot of the misconceptions about what applies to Native American people and what doesn't, because even like in the days leading up to this, I had mentioned to one of my brothers that I was going to be doing this interview about Native American stuff, and he said something that sounded really false. I was like, that doesn't sound right. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, you know what? I don't even know if it's correct. Uh, so there's a lot of like misconceptions, like, you know, Native Americans. I think someone said they're not allowed to vote, which I'm pretty sure that's not true. I'm pretty sure that one is false. Then there's one about Native Americans not being allowed to own land. Um, and a couple of other misconceptions like that. So can you point out some of the big misconceptions that people generally have about uh, Native Americans, Native American rights, and yeah, if you could just dive into that.
we could we could start with the first two. I own land and I voted, so I hope it's legal.
I hope so
Um,
too.
they'll check it though. We'll make sure that we're on board. Um, gonna mail it in early. Uh,
Oh,
those
oh,
two
well, also don't vote twice.
exactly.
Yeah, don't do
Don't.
that.
I'm not gonna mail it in and then go to the poll because that would be, I think, voter fraud. I believe so. I wouldn't do that. I don't know why someone would try to do that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's strange.
bad advice. Um, yes, misconceptions. Let's see here. You're all just um, maybe there's a misconception that we just get a huge leg up from the government and we're just living off it. You know, you can see old South Park episodes where all the natives are running around like high executives because they own casinos. And so that's unfortunately not true. Poverty is horrible on the reservation, as is domestic abuse and violence. Um, as we talked about earlier with that hashtag MMIW. Um, Other misconceptions. Um, let's see. I guess it's how you identify, perhaps. But we were once asked, "Do you celebrate Thanksgiving?" Which potentially might be a legitimate question if you know the history. You know, um, that came from a friend, and that was a great question, I thought. And he was asking my mother at the time, and she goes, "Yeah, we do," because unfortunately, she fell victim to one of the U.S. government's policies, and she was adopted by force, if you will, maybe. And so she explained to him that because of that, she grew up in a white home with white culture and never got a chance to learn her heritage, basically. Um, and so that's why she explained, yes, we do. And but yes, other natives do celebrate that as well. Other misconceptions. Um, let's see. The citizenship thing about voting. Yeah, so U.S. law does not apply on reservations, and you had someone trying to argue that recently in the Supreme Court case with McGirt versus Oklahoma, and that doesn't affect tribal sovereignty or anything like that, like people think. That just might affect individual Native American rights on and off reservations. But so it is, reservations are not necessarily part of the US government. It's not part. It is a sovereignty where different laws apply. If you're, and the same laws apply to you and anyone else who's non-indigenous. If you're on a reservation, don't go committing any crimes now because of what you think I'm saying, because the laws of the US still do apply to you there. It just might apply differently to us in certain instances. Mainly jurisdiction on who hauls you into jail, right? Tribal police.
A quick question on that then.
Sure.
Are you saying that if your legal address is on the reservation, does that mean that you cannot vote because you're technically outside of, I guess, US domain?
No, you can vote because
You can vote. Okay.
because the laws encompass you. If you think about it, the laws still are all around you. You're still completely affected by US policy for the most part. Heck, US policy could be one day we're just going to erase the reservations and then we can forget all about how America came to be.
Yeah, I don't think that will happen at this point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Stranger Things.
We're talking thousands of years, perhaps, where histories get lost and truths get lost, I guess. Let's see. If I'm trying to think of other questions.
While you're thinking of other misconceptions, you said your mother was adopted. You said forcefully, or like, could you expand on that? Because you kind of went by that pretty quickly. I was like, I want to know more.
Sure. So after the U.S. government was kind of tired of fighting us in the West through a policy of annihilation, well, they just got tired of it. And so U.S. policy changed, official U.S. government policy changed to, okay, if we're not going to fight them, let's just breed the Indian out. And so we can do that. And this first started by sending them to boarding schools, which were, I don't know if you want to use the term schools there. The best example I can give you of what the horrors of those places were is they have little tiny miniature handcuffs for children who are 3 to 10. And so that policy enacted those boarding schools, and those boarding schools were happening up until the 60s and 70s in some places, and they were
when was
horrific.
this policy enacted?
1800s, late.
And they went up till the 1960s and such?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where a lot of indigenous people from the reservation will talk about native rights and maybe thinking that U.S. government policy is still in that favor, because in some context, some Native American rights activists have asked the U.S. government to change the language of that, and they don't really feel the need to, strangely. Those boarding schools, I could be off on that date. It could be early 1900s too. Maybe no. I think I'm pretty right on that. And if I'm wrong, it's just past the turn of the century. And so those places were awful. But the whole point was to breed the culture out of that group. But you have strange things happen, like the use of drums in ceremony and smoking more so, because those are just standard practices among a lot of tribes when they would get together. But because you have a bunch of different native tribes together, because they're being pulled from all families and put into these US sanctioned boarding schools, if you will, a collective, cohesive culture sort of was kind of practiced when the schoolmasters would turn their back. And that was the only way that they tried to practice their culture. But very much they succeeded, because you're talking to someone like myself. In my mother's context, when social services starts to target a group or an ethnic group, um, it leads to children being taken away from their parents very easily, and maybe in situations where um, it's not justified. And so you can definitely use the argument for statistics that the U.S. government, 1870s, my wife just looked it up. That policy was enacted in the 1870s. Thank you. She is, got to give her a shout out. She's the best. Um, so, so again, they could use social services to pull natives away from their family, even if, even if you could say that one or two of the parents were capable of taking care of the children. Why not use that excuse and put them with a white family, perhaps? And that's again just a way to quit fighting the natives by just assimilating them into culture. And very much so, we just talked about being an apple, and where that's why that hierarchy might exist.
So essentially, they were brought into re-education camps to. I mean, that's essentially, it's an American version of a re-education camp.
Just like you can talk about China
Yeah,
and the Muslims who are being captured there, and people, their family members have no idea if they're alive or not. And some, if they do make it out,
yeah,
they sure do love China after that.
right.
Um, that actually, that policy was brought that was brought to my attention by Mesut Ozil of Arsenal.
Mm,
He talked about that, but Arsenal at the time weren't, they're doing great with the Black Lives Matter awareness, but at the time they quieted him down on that.
yeah.
So you brought it up, different levels of attention to different groups and whether that's correct or not, and that's why I figure let's just go for everyone who's the most marginalized.
Well, I mean, down to the Ozil thing, and it's also part of what I said my co-host and I were going to talk about on the podcast or our regular show. It's that it almost seems as though we we kind of pick and choose, what we want to care about. And I don't mean that as like a negative against people who don't care about these things, but it's a lot easier to kind of separate yourself from certain atrocities, um, as long as you can't, as long as you remain blissfully ignorant, or you can't actually associate maybe a friend or a family member or someone that with those atrocities, right? Um, so it's very easy for someone like myself, which I haven't yet, but my co-host has watched Mulan, which is why when you posted that, I shared it with him immediately because I was like, "Well, we're gonna talk about this now since you watched it." Um, it's a lot easier for us to like watch the movie and just turn our brains off to those things, because to think about those would then have to force us to like to weigh, is this atrocity so bad that I can't enjoy this art, or yeah. And also one more thing on that, I don't know if you're a fan of R&B, but Chris Brown is one of the hottest artists in the game, and he has so many issues with like aggression, whether it's the Rihanna thing or literally every other thing that's been documented about him since. But his music still slaps, uh, pun unintended, right? But and the thing is, like we've sort of in a very bad way, numbed ourselves to the bad things that he and other people like him were doing, because we're like, but how does that weigh with the quality that he's given us? And so, anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a segue, but I was just thinking of, the different ways in which you know, we blind ourselves to atrocities because, you know, there's like positive, or there's like good entertainment coming out of it or something. But anyway, sorry, back to
So
you.
sometimes Amazon does have the best price. What can you do? It's hard not to be a hypocrite in this world.
Yes,
I
that's
mean,
true.
I'm wearing Nikes, like
Yeah.
so part of this journey too is realizing that
Hmm.
and realizing where we're falling short by some of these groups. I have never, I mean, even though I work with them a lot, uh, I've again dove into different aspects like ableist language, which is discrimination against those who are disabled. Um, and just thinking about that in different ways, the LGBTQ plus community in Monroe, which is very vulnerable too. It's it's hard to put yourself in someone in everyone else's shoes. I think the only way forward would be education because what I've seen is people who, as you hit it the nail on the head, if you can contextualize anything by just knowing someone and talking to them about it and saying, "Oh, you experienced that? I didn't know that." Um, that is how you step forward and you can associate it and perhaps learn. Um, that's yeah, you hit the nail on the head by associating with someone you know.
Yeah, I think that's why I thought it was like very important to have this particular conversation with you because I think you're the only person I can think of um, in my like immediate circle that is Native American, and other than other than this conversation, I haven't really had any sort of in-depth conversations at any length about Native American issues. So I can only sort of glean information from afar from whether it's the mainstream media or just other outlets like that. I mentioned to you that I've started listening on Audible to There by Tommy Orange to just kind of get some insight. But until you actually interact with people and hear their stories and such, everything just seems so abstract, And you know, as long as things remain abstract, it's hard to care. Yeah. So
It's true. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why I've always thought, and this is a complete segue. I don't know why I'm doing a lot of segues today, but that's why I've always thought college is a good thing, like people going to college, because high school, middle school, you generally go to school within your district, right? So with people or people of your ilk, yeah, people of your economic status, your likely your color, and all that. And then when you go to college, that's when you have the mixture of people. Like I think you went to Life University for the chiropractor school,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So and Life is like in Cobb County, but you have people go there from so many different places, right? Not even different places in Georgia, different places from outside of Georgia too. So you then get to mix with people that you normally wouldn't have mixed with if you had just stayed in your own county or your own district. And yeah, in that same way, if we could all just get out of our little bubbles, out of our little echo chambers, and interact with people, other than ourselves, we learn a lot.